Well, in yesterday's video, I talked about why it was so wet over recent months and also touched on the fact that it's getting colder this upcoming weekend and potentially even more cold as we move towards the middle portion of the month. It's all part of the 2023-24 forecast. Let's get right into it. Thanks for clicking on to the Thursday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. It's January the 4th, and the Madden-Julian oscillation is in phases 2, borderline 3 at the moment. We have, since Christmas, went into a strong phase 1, phase 2 of the MJO, and that then correlates quite nicely to high pressure over Iceland, low pressure over Europe, less settled, especially in the southern UK. And lo and behold, we've had Storm Henk. It comes hot on the heels of Storm Garrick. I think that was the pronunciation. And we have had 8 named storms since the beginning of September when the new 2023-24 season began, according to the Met Office here. And we've actually had more storms than that because the Met Office has named 8 storms so far, but we've had other named storms that have been released by other Met services. So it has been a very, very busy spell from late July all the way through till now. And, we had a tremendous amount of rainfall October, November. That was followed by the cold spell in late November, early December. We've had another really significant spell of wet conditions late December into early January. And the question is, are we then heading back to the cold spell that was seen late November, early December? That remains to be seen. I'm a big believer in repeating patterns. I'm also a believer in Joe Bastardi's theory, where you get tremendous amounts of rainfall and then a cold spell follows that. And it looks as if, certainly according to everything that we can see, all the tools that we've got to do weather forecasting, everything appears to be coming into place with regards to the next spell of cold weather. Exactly how cold it becomes remains to be seen. I've not been buying wholly in on the extreme cold spell for mid-January, but there's a tremendous amount of potential in this pattern. Finland has now recorded as cold as January temperatures since back in 2006. We've seen the second coldest temperatures since 1999 in Sweden. And we've had several mornings now where the temperature has dropped into the minus 40s in central and northern Scandinavia. And it looks as if that's going to continue now. With that cold never too far away and with higher pressure building in towards this weekend, forced by that MJO phase 1 into phase 2. You can see here high pressure over Iceland, low pressure over Europe. Like I say, less settled over the southern UK. The Arctic oscillation is going back into the tank once again. And this is all part of the ideas that I've had all the way back to the end of November, by the way, when long before these models were indicating what they're showing, which proves that the theory that I had, the hard work that has been put in over the last, 5 or 6 months, by the way, is showing merit. Now, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to happen, but you can see at least where I got the ideas in the first place. And that is the important thing. There's too many people out there focusing on one individual model run, buying into it. If I did that, folks, the forecast would be all over the place. By the way, I got a kind donation by Peter Karski. I hope that's the right pronunciation. Just at the beginning there, just before Christmas, a very kind super thanks. I want to say a big thank you to Peter for that kind donation. I apologize, it is rather late to say that thank you, but it is very much appreciated, Peter, and I wish you and your family a very happy new year. And of course, as I've already said, a happy new year to everybody. Now, the North Atlantic oscillation also is going back firmly negative once again. Now, remember the MJO. Yes, it has been in strong phases 1 and 2, but remember the pattern takes time to respond. Remember, the forcing is taking place within the tropics. You're talking several thousand miles to get up into the mid to high latitudes of the planet here, but it looks as if the upper air pattern within the mid latitudes, then corresponding to the upper latitudes, is responding, and it's a downstream, downwind effect. And you can see here, looking at the GFS ensemble, this is a slightly out of date version. I do apologize. It always seems to be I record these videos at the wrong time when the models are actually updating. I do apologise for that. But this is the upcoming 5 days. Bitterly cold conditions. What a contrast over Eastern Europe, by the way. +10 in southern Ukraine, -40 Western Russia. Not a huge deal of distance between those two locations, but we've got a vast contrast in temperature. So we've got that reservoir of very cold air over northern and northeastern Europe. Very mild conditions across the southeast, may I add, and we've got borderline colder than average conditions setting up as we move towards the upcoming weekend. And then it's beyond that, things may start to get interesting. I'm going to show you why that area of high pressure starts to build over the UK, settles things down. So we initially draw the cold air in from the east northeast. Then, with the high becoming a bit of a lid over the atmosphere of the UK and Ireland, we then cut off that source of cold air, but there's then cold air in place stuck underneath that high. We're going to see some pretty cold nights and also cold days. Fog will probably become a problem because we've got a lot of water in the ground that then releases moisture into the atmosphere. When the dew point drops, when the temperature drops, we then see frost formation, and places such as the Vale of York, the central belt of Scotland, other areas that are sheltered from any breeze. When that fog sets in, it may linger potentially for a few days without any wind to stir the atmosphere up. But watch what happens in the 6 to 10 day. We then turn notably colder across the UK, Ireland, and northern portions of France. Much of Europe, where it has been mild, turns colder than average. And then even the 11 to 15 day, you can see here, it even turns colder than that. That's the period between the 14th and the 19th of January. But let's see what's going on at the moment here. This is the current temperatures over Scandinavia, by the way. There's several spots, -43, -44 Celsius, recorded in the north of Sweden. And this is not just today. This has been the case for several days. So the source region is very cold indeed over Scandinavia. Now, what is going to happen over the next several days is we're going to start to see higher pressure building in. But before we get there, let's have a look at the pressure chart. And we've got yet another system attacking the southern UK. More rain on top of rain is never a good thing, of course. But high pressure is not necessarily in control at the moment. We've got one low to the north of the UK that's going to affect northern Scotland, showers and breezy conditions. We've got the next area of low pressure moving across the southern half of the British Isles. And if you look at the current radar chart, you can see here off Weather Online that we've got a shield of heavy rainfall extending from Cornwall all the way down to Margate. And that is not a good situation given what we've seen so far in recent times. So as we skip through the sequence here, we've got that area of high pressure, that very cold air in place over Scandinavia. There's the low to the north of the UK. There's the low to the south of the UK. And then it's really actually what is taking place over the North American side of the Atlantic that things get interesting. So we'll look at that and show you how the pattern then starts to become evolving over the weekend and the next week. Notice the strong jet. Notice how far south it is within the middle latitude pattern. This is actually the kind of the subtropical region, of course, and you've got a pretty strong jet ripping across the southern United States and Florida. Excuse me, feeling a little bit under the weather in recent days. I do apologise. But what is notable here is we've got a fairly slack jet stream. Yeah, we've still got a jet. Notice how far south it is over the eastern side of the Atlantic here. So it's moving through the Azores into Iberia, northern France. We've got that feature then moving across the southern UK. We've got other areas of low pressure up towards Greenland, Iceland, etc., etc. But as we play through this loop, you notice what happens here. We start to get a little bit of a buckle. You see this kind of northward jog of the jet here. That then helps to force a deepening of low pressure, incubation region, if you will, over the Grand Banks of Newfoundland here. Now, as we play through the loop, when you've got that kind of ripple, that kink in the jet, you then force the air to pile up and low pressure to deepen. As these features deepen, notice I hit the pressure at 955 millibars over the northwest Atlantic. What that's doing is it's forcing the high to the east of that to strengthen, to deepen. And if you then look at the upper air pattern here, the 500 millibar geopotential heights, you can see how that is affecting the 800 or 18,000 foot level pressure situation here. So if we skip back through the sequence, we've got these areas of low pressure exiting the southern United States, entering the North Atlantic. There's the area of high pressure. We've got an area of low pressure, as you can see, over the UK and Ireland. But as these features then become deepened over the western and northwestern Atlantic, it's forcing the strengthening of this high to the west of the British Isles. And what will eventually happen is, as we start to see this low really wind up, this trough deepening, you're then forcing the high to strengthen to the east. And what happens is, we've got that area of high pressure becoming stronger over the northern UK. So then, therefore, we're pulling in winds from the cold source of Scandinavia, albeit not necessarily in a bodily fashion, like a beastly or an beast from the east or anything, but with the high, with the deepening of the trough over the northwest Atlantic, moving into the central North Atlantic, that then forces the high to build over the northern UK. The position of that high means that we're pulling our air in from Scandinavia. So if we look at this run here off the GFS, this is the surface chart here, the overview, and watch what's happening. This is what I'm talking about. So as that cold air, the cold air is in place here over Scandinavia, we're deepening that area of low pressure over the northwestern Atlantic. That's then forcing the high to actually join forces between the southwest UK and Scandinavia. So as you can see here, as we move through the course of the weekend, we're losing the low pressure, we're replacing it with high pressure, and we're subtly drawing that cold air into the southern half of the British Isles. And if we look at the 850 temperature chart, you can see that cold air drawn in to the UK here. It's just skipped slightly further back, and you can see that we see the filling of those lows in UK airspace, the deepening of the low over the west-northwest Atlantic, drawing that warm advection, pulling warmer northwards up towards Greenland, up towards Iceland, and in turn, that is then pulling that cold air out of northwestern Russia underneath the high that's then building and stretching, and you can see the cold air coming into the British Isles. But what happens is, we then go back to the overview chart, we actually then cut off the cold, because the high then becomes more established. Notice here that the isobars are then pinching together. We've got a bit of a relaxation of the cold, possibly over Scandinavia, but you notice we've not got that connection between Scandinavia and the UK. We're now focusing the high over the UK and Ireland here. But then watch what happens. As areas of low pressure then move over the Atlantic, as that high then becomes stronger, you're then opening the door further south. And what happens is, we've got then weather moving underneath that high into Iberia, into the western half of Europe, underneath, and allowing the high over the UK this weekend into early next week to then start to pull up towards Iceland. Look at this here. Isn't that interesting? And then we see the northerly or northeasterly flow coming into the British Isles. We'll now then force the high to retrograde up towards Greenland here. And there's that negative NAO and AO signal starting to show up. We'll look at temperature and snowfall and details on that in the next couple of videos, probably tomorrow onwards here. But I'm just trying to show you the evolution of how this cold pattern is becoming more involved, and it's certainly very interesting stuff indeed. Can the models back off? Of course they can. We've seen that time and time again as well. But I think there's enough evidence to support the potential is very real when it comes to the middle portion of this month. So stay tuned, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow with more weather. Bye for now.